Wise Way Learning presents the lecture number 63 to 80 under section 15. This is a complete project management free course from beginner to project manager with 19 sections of 100 lectures. Welcome to the course. Section 15 and lecture number 63 to 80, MS Excel for Project Management. This section includes the lectures such as Lecture 63 Introduction to MS Excel, Lecture 64 Tracker 1 of High Level, Lecture 65 Tracker 2 of Standard Tasks, Lecture 66 Tracker 3 of Few Steps and Statuses, Lecture 67 Project Management Logs, Lecture 68 Actions, Issues, Dependencies Log, Lecture 69 RAID Log, Lecture 70 RAID Log, Structures, Lecture 71 Risks Log, Lecture 72 Project Management Logs, Outro, Lecture 73 Project Schedule, Lecture 74 Gantt Chart, Months, Lecture 75 Gantt Chart, Weeks, Lecture 76 Budget, Simple Table, Lecture 77 Budget, Time and Materials, Lecture 78 Formatting Tips and Tricks, Lecture 79 MS Excel for Project Management, Conclusions, Lecture 80 Project Management Notes and PMBOK. Section 15 and Lecture number 63, Introduction MS Excel.
Hi! In this chapter, we will work to boost our technical skills and become better at creating and maintaining some of the key project management artifacts. These tools are critical for any project manager to keep a good grip on all important project events. A great part of those are based on some kind of a table. Well, not exactly this one. Okay, much better. So, columns and rows. And which renowned program enables you to do countless tables? Yes, you got it. Microsoft Excel. And this is what we will be looking at. We will learn how to create the 5 most important project management documents in Excel. Work trackers, logs from project diary to RAID, risk log, project schedule and Gantt chart, and budget. The first 2 artifacts are mostly used during the monitoring and control phase. Work trackers enable the project manager to follow the progress of the project team against the established targets, while the RAID log helps manage and track all events that are somehow important for the project progress and success. The last 3, which we already know well, are created during the planning phase and are maintained and used until the end of the project. As explained, there is nothing to worry about from a technical perspective as no heavy formulas are needed. We will focus on the contents of the tables, learning what the important factors from the project manager perspective are, and in parallel, see some of the Excel functionalities that are often used, such as conditional formatting, data validation, and some basic formatting. We will use Microsoft Excel 365 for the lessons, but which version is not that important, as these functionalities are basic and can be found in any version. Note that these tutorials will be very useful even if you're using Google Sheets, as both programs have the functionalities we will be looking at and a very similar structure. Okay, great. Let's start with the first document. So, Project Manager. Imagine you are having your first project status meeting. You present the Gantt chart where the team can see the first 2 activities have been completed and the third one is ongoing, as we are in week 6 currently. You report that the team is now working on a 3rd activity, but you get a question like, what is the progress of this activity? Or, how much of it is completed? Are we on track? What do you say? Seems so? No. A project manager must know how to answer all these questions. In fact, the first person who needs to ask these questions to the project manager is the project manager themselves. In this personal Q&A, a table must be created which can easily answer the question. That is called a work tracker. Its purpose is to track the actual progress of the work against the plan. Note, tracking happens on a detailed task level. Hence, the project plan document will not give you this information. It is the other way round. This is the document which will give you the information of how well the overall activity is progressing. In the next lessons, we will see how to build a tracker for a few different cases. See you there.
Section 15 and Lecture number 64, Tracker 1 of High Level.
Welcome back. Let's have a look at the first case, a high-level tracker. This can be used when you need to follow the progress of an activity which is performed for a few categories, different regions, different countries, different business lines, etc. For example, your project is about implementing a new software for accounting processes. Your company has presence in Germany, France, Singapore, and Japan, and the new system will be used by all local accounting departments. Your next activity in the plan is to collect the names of all employees who will need to use the software. As the organization includes thousands of people, you have requested the finance and accounting managers of each country to provide the list of names for their local departments. Let's open our Excel. A good first step before typing anything is to mark the whole sheet and change the fill color to white. In this way, you remove the default grid lines and give your file a cleaner look. We will start typing not from the very edge of the sheet, being cell A1, but we'll leave one column and one row empty. This gives some space to the table and is a commonly adopted practice. We will also reduce the height and width of the first row and column. We are now ready to start from cell B2. Note, we will be applying these initial steps to all files we create. Okay, you can now create the tracker. Create a table manually, going column by column. Your first one should be the category. In our case, country. Note, we will be doing basic formatting. I will select the cell and text colors now, and we'll do some final touches once the whole table is ready. Additional tips and tricks with regards to formatting will be reviewed in a separate lesson at the end of this section. Alright, back to our title row. I will go for a blue color and paint the letters white for better contrast. Okay, now, inside this column, we will have the 4 countries listed. The next column can be the name of the responsible person to complete the action, whatever the action is. In our case, here we have the names of the 4 F&A managers. Then, status, the one thing you will always have in a tracker, arguably the most important column. In the status field, you need to have limited options. Typically, these will be not started, ongoing, and completed. It is equally important to also set color coding here. The most practical way is to set this as a drop-down menu. Let's see how to do that. Select the cells under the status header. Select Data from the main tab and then Data Validation. A pop-up screen appears. Here, in the Settings tab, there is a drop-down menu under the Allow menu. Select List. Below, you can see a new field has appeared, Source. You can type the values that you want your list to have, separated by a comma, like that. Note, the list separator symbol may be different depending on your Windows settings. Semicolon is used for certain regions. In case these do not work for you, check your list separator symbol in your control panel under Region. Okay, moving on. Click OK. Ready. These cells are now drop-down menus, from which you can only select between the 3 options: not started, ongoing, and completed. Next up, we need to color code the 3 options. So whenever we select completed, for example, it shows a positive color, like blue or green. Select the drop-down menu cells. From the Home tab, select Conditional Formatting. From the options, select New Rule. A pop-up window appears. Select from the list you see, Format only cells that contain. The format of the window changes, and at its bottom you can now program your rule. Leave the first drop-down as Cell Value. Change the second one to Equal to. This means the new rule will be applied only if the value matches what you write here. In the final box to the right, write down your first status option, not started. Now, you can select the color. Below there is a button format. Click on it. I will select a color to fill the cell, so I will go to the Fill tab. The menu with the colors appears and you can select the one for not started. I would go with something neutral here, let's say gray. Click OK and again OK on the window. Let's see if it works. We select a cell and choose Not Started. Hurrah! We have successfully color-coded this option. We need to continue with the rest in the exact same way. I would choose green for ongoing and blue for completed. Great! Our status column is now ready. Finally, it is often convenient to add a free text column in such documents for comments. Here we leave room for any ad hoc explanations that are important for the work. For example, Frank needs to prepare the list not only for his internal employees, but also for the employees of a vendor company which provides services to his organization. They also need accesses to our system so that they provide the service. You can add these as a comment for better clarity. We are ready with the table contents, and we can do some more formatting. The first thing we need is to put borders. The quickest way to do that is to select the whole table and click on All Borders from the Borders drop-down menu. Next, I will use bold for the title row. You can also increase the text size by 1 degree to further strengthen the titles visually. Let's see the alignment. The contents of my status column are standardized and limited within the 3 options. Hence, it will look better if aligned in the center. I will select the whole column and click on the center option under the alignment section on the Home tab. Neat. Then I can decrease the text size of the status options by selecting the cells below the title and decrease the font size. Alright. This may be a simple table, yet it is quite effective. In your next project meeting, you present it, and all team members can see it. You are well in control of the status, and Max, Frank, George and Akira now know very well that their work is important for the project and the progress will be monitored. Let's continue with the next work tracker. See you next lesson.
Section 15 and lecture number 65, Tracker 2 of Standard Tasks.
We will now build a tracker for managing project tasks that are similar in kind and higher in number. 10, 20, 30 tasks of a similar kind, for instance. Examples can be found in almost any type of project. The montage of interior doors by the carpenters in a construction project, the documentation of process flowcharts by a business analyst in a Lean Six Sigma project, the creation of user accounts by an IT support specialist in a software implementation project, and so on. As we said, similar or identical types of tasks. Let's open Excel. As a first step, we will again respect the best practice of marking your whole sheet in white and adapting the first row and column. Then, we need to create our tracker column by column. In this case, we will have more rows. Hence, I will number them and have the first column as number marked with N, for example. We will format the column title as we did in the previous lesson. You can write the numbers below by typing 1 and 2 in the first 2 cells. Then select both cells and drag down. Excel understands you want to create a list, so populates and gives you the sequence. Let's say we have 19 tasks here. For this table, we will apply all borders from the Borders menu on the Home tab. And we will optimize the column width by double-clicking on its right border above, like that. The next column is the task name. Note, it is very important to add a name that is not confusing. So remember to always name the tasks clearly. Use the documentation of process flowcharts by a business analyst in a Lean Six Sigma project as an example. Assuming the processes are related to the F&A department, we list the exact names of the processes. Okay, we now have the processes' names listed in the task column. Needless to say, this list has to be agreed upon with the stakeholders before the business analysts start working on it. Moving on, the next critical information will be who is responsible for each task. Let's say in our case we have two business analysts, Jessica and Mark. After agreeing who will do what, we can include a name against each of the tasks. Note, if in your project there is only one person responsible for all tasks, it will not make much sense to have this column. It would just waste space without providing valuable information, so you can skip it in such cases. The next one is our favorite, status column. We already know how to set it in Excel, so we won't repeat the steps here. Nevertheless, if you're still in doubt, feel free to review the previous lesson again. The next column is about the completion percentage. Here we will be tracking the progress using the conceptual range 0% to 100%. When the tasks take more time, more than one day, let's say, this column gives valuable information on the actual status. If one process mapping takes 5 working days on average, the business analyst will be updating the completion percentage each day. If, for example, after day 3, the progress is above 60%, that will be a good indicator that things are progressing normally. However, if after day 2, the progress is 10%, let's say, this will make the project manager ask questions right away. Attention! This column is very useful, but needs to be managed carefully as the decision on the percentage may often be subjective. The one thing you don't want is to have a good completion percentage which is not reflecting reality. This will mislead the project manager and the stakeholders to think that everything is okay, while the true progress is actually way lower. Expectations management should be carefully performed by the project management here. My advice is to always be on the safe side and be more conservative in the percentages you or your team member adds here. Okay. With the percentages in place, we can calculate a total number, indicating the overall progress so far. We can select a cell at the bottom of the same column or at the top if the list is too long. We will use the average formula in Excel. Type equals and then average. Now you need to select the cells for which the average will be calculated. Select all completion percentage cells. When ready, click Enter. There you have it, an overall completion percentage number. Attention! This total will be correct if the tasks are very similar in terms of effort needed to complete one. If the processes in our case take about 5 days each, the overall completion percentage will be realistic. However, if some of the processes take 2 days and others take 10 days, the simple average will not be a correct representation of the reality. This needs to be taken into account when agreeing how to present progress in this way. Finally, we leave one free text column for comments. We are already familiar with the purpose of this one, right? Okay, we can finish with some formatting. Again, we put the title row in bold. We can increase the row height and then use the middle align so text is centered also vertically. We already centered the text for columns where it would make sense. In this case, responsible, status, and completion percentage columns. Finally, we can give the needed space to the completion and responsible titles by double-clicking on their main column borders. Perfect. Here we have our work tracker. With this document, the project manager and the team can keep control on all tasks, catch any delays in a timely manner, and monitor the work progress transparently. So useful. Let's continue with the final tracker template in Excel in the next video. See you there.
Section 15 and lecture number 66, Tracker 3 of Few Steps and Statuses.
The third type we will review is about cases, when the project manager has to monitor the progress of a task across a few sequential steps. Imagine that as part of your project, a new department or new team will be established. 5 new employees need to be recruited, then onboarded to the company, and finally to be provided with access to an important corporate system. Hence, there will be 3 steps: recruit, onboard, and provide system access. The whole activity is lengthy, as it can take 2 to 3 months, and you want to be tracking the progress diligently. So whenever one step is ready, the next one starts immediately, without wasting any time in between. We begin as usual, column by column. First one can be a number indicator again. In the second column, where we usually add the category or task name, we will have the name of the new employee in this case. Next, we will have status. However, we will have one status column for each step. In this case, 3 columns. One for recruitment, one for onboarding, and one for the accesses. A little bit of formatting is needed here, as we have a lot of text in each cell. I will select the cells and wrap the text like that, and then adjust the column's width altogether. Okay. We can use the status drop-downs we already created previously. We copy and paste these for all rows below the 3 headers. Now, if you want to avoid having the word status in each title box, we can insert an additional row under the title area. In the lower row, we copy and paste the content of the upper cells. We can remove the text from the row above by selecting them and pressing the delete button on your keyboard. Then we merge the 3 cells above the status names and name it status. We can delete the word status from the 3 cells below. We need to optimize the height of these 2 rows by selecting them and then double-clicking on one of the main borders, like that. Good. As the other column headers are now having this idle row, we need to merge those and recenter again, one by one. All right. Finally, same tip for the final column. Free text, named comments. And we're done. Now we can comprehensively track the progress of the recruitment, following the key steps for each new employee. Note, as these are sequential steps, the status of a step cannot be more advanced compared to the status of the previous step, the one to its left. For example, if the person has not yet accepted their job offer, onboarding cannot have an ongoing status. As usual, we can do some final formatting to the title row. Awesome! We also completed the 3rd tracker lesson in Excel. Can you see how useful trackers really are? They are one of the secret weapons of the project manager to monitor and control the important project tasks, which often remain hidden behind an activity from the project plan. And if that activity is on the critical path, you already know the impact on the project schedule will be even worse. But thanks to the work trackers, a project manager can observe the progress on a daily basis. Now that you know how to create different trackers, you can use that to customize one for your specific project needs. Need a standard tracker with just a few columns? Task responsible and status? Easy. You know how to do it. You want to add completion percentage, or you need to track a few steps, hence include few status columns. It's no problem. Whatever project comes now, you will be able to craft your own tool for monitoring the progress of any task. The almighty project work tracker.
Section 15 and lecture number 67, Project Management Logs.
In the next few lessons, we will learn how to use Microsoft Excel to create another powerful project management tool. Logs. Well, I mean a log document or log file. Okay, that's better. So what is a log? Basically, this is a document where important events are recorded, written down, or logged. Once logged, people can obtain information about these events. What is it about? Who is involved? Are there any next steps? What is the due date for closing the case? During the execution phase lessons, we already introduced the basis of all these logs, the project diary. Remember what the three fields were that it includes? Action, owner, and due date. This is the ultimate project management recipe for getting things done, documenting explicitly in a written format what has to be done, by whom, and when. Remember this formula as it has tremendous effects. So let's switch to Excel and develop our first log. We will start with a number field. Project management logs can have hundreds of rows in bigger projects, so the numeration is essential. Then we have the action. Here we need a short title or sentence to explain what this action is about. In the example we used in the high-level tracker lesson, usernames had to be collected by the F&A managers so that the accounts are created in the new system for these employees. Remember? For France, the manager needed to prepare an additional list for the external to his company vendor employees who also need accounts. Frank collects this additional list, however figures out that these new accounts will need to be paid for from the French budget and not from the project budget. That had not been validated before the start of the project. Although the amount is not significant, the budget cannot be granted without the approval from the CFO. There you go. We have an action for our log. Approval on additional budget to be obtained by France CFO. We type it into our Excel table. Note, I will make the text smaller and use the wrap text functionality to keep it more readable. I will also make the rows higher because in the log documents you usually add more text. I will do that by selecting all rows and then by changing the height of one of them. All selected rows will identically change. Okay, moving on. The owner column. This basically is the same thing as the responsible column we saw before. You can choose the title you like as they are used as synonyms. Here we would have Frank as the best person to contact the CFO, explain the case and follow up until this is ready. He agrees to be the owner, so we write down his name. Time for the third key element, due date. Here it is important to format your date using the Excel options. Let's imagine the due date is the 5th of May. We can type 05/05/2025, the day, month, and year. What comes out is not so easily readable, so we select the cell and go to number format by clicking on the small arrow here. A pop-up appears. In the category field, you need to select date. Now, to the right, you have the various date formats. Choose whichever suits your needs best. I like using a number for the day and letters for the month. You can also decide whether you want the year to be displayed. My advice is to skip the year, when the action should be closed in the next days or weeks and is not expected to end up in the following year. Okay, I will also put the date column contents in the center of the cell. Ready. Now we have the mandatory action owner due date information logged. From here onward, we can continue adding columns that will help us better manage the activities. Our well-known status column is a valuable next step. We already know how to build it, so let's quickly add it in the format we are familiar with. Lastly, we add the free text comments column to ensure we capture any important information that falls out of the previous categories. Perfect. We have the basic log for managing project actions. In this format, this project management artifact is referred to as actions log. In the next lesson, we will see some additional scenarios of how to broaden the scope of this log.
Section 15 and lecture number 68, Actions, Issues, Dependencies Log.
In the last lesson, we saw how project actions get registered in the actions log, the action owner due date best practice. Comprehensive monitoring and control ensures project actions are performed in a timely manner in order to avoid problems. But in projects, things are never fully predicted. almost always there will be something to surprise the project manager. An actual problem that impacts the project is called an issue. Let's say in the earlier example, the CFO refuses to approve the additional budget for the accounts of the vendor employees. We have an issue and it needs to be registered. Most of the fields will be the same as in our actions log. The main difference is that it is not an action, but an issue. So in order to track both types of events in the same table, we can add an additional column to indicate whether we have an action or an issue on this row. A drop-down menu will be used here from which we will be selecting either action or issue, depending on the case. So we insert a new column before the owner one and name it action/issue. Then we create the drop-down, something we already learned. Select the cells under the title, select Data from the main tab and then Data Validation. A pop-up screen appears. Here in the Settings tab, there is a drop-down menu under the Allow menu. Select List. Below you can see a new field has appeared, Source. You can type the values that you want your list to have. Click OK. Ready. Now we can select whether the event on this line is an action or an issue. In our case, it is the latter. One more thing. The title of the second column still shows action. We need to change that to, let's say, description, so we avoid a contradiction between this column and the next one. Alright. Let's also center this column, action issue, for better aesthetics. But are these two options enough? Various events happen in a project. The project manager shifts the attention to the high-level tracker created for collecting names by the 4 F&A managers. The project manager notes the work still hasn't started for Singapore. A meeting is quickly arranged and George explains the reason. It turns out there's another project running in parallel in Singapore. The previously small finance department is now growing and new employees are being hired. The project team there is still working to determine the new roles and responsibilities in this department. Hence, George does not know the exact names to be provided in the list. The input for a deliverable in your project is dependent on the outcome of another project. This event is called a project dependency. We will perform the same update to our log, so we can capture also dependencies. We select our drop-down cells range and go to data validation. Here in the source field we add dependency as an additional possible value for the drop-down. Ready. Now we can also log this event into our document and update the title of this new column. Action, Issues, Dependencies. A, I, D. Our project manager is doing a good job so far with the documentation of project events. Let's see what else may happen in the next video.
Section 15 in lecture number 69, RAID log.
Welcome back. While analyzing the issue with the additional budget, our project manager suddenly notices that only the French branch has informed about vendor employees supporting the financial and accounting processes. What if the rest of our F&A managers have this situation? The project manager sends an email to them and boom. Turns out also the Japanese branch is supported by an external company. There's a big risk that the same issue will occur as it did in the French scenario. Where should the project manager log this concern? Why not in our log for actions, issues, dependencies, and risks? So we use Excel to also add the risks option via the data validation functionality. We also update the column title to include the letter R. We describe the risk and assign the owner and due date. Okay, logged. As a next step, the project manager asks Akira, the local F&A manager, to request the budget approval from the local CFO. A few days later, the project manager receives an invitation for an online meeting with Akira and the local CFO. In that meeting, Akira explains the budget matter to the CFO in more detail. The CFO asks if the vendor employees do not get user accesses for the system, can somebody from our own organization perform the related tasks? Akira confirms it is possible, but it will increase the workload of the employees. The CFO asks how much. She explains that she does not know now and needs to estimate. The three agree that Akira will do that and send via mail the estimated increase in the workload until the end of the week. What would you do as project manager? Yes, log this as an action. On Friday, Akira sends the email. Workload increases estimated at about 2 days per week for one employee. The alternative solution, in which vendor employees receive access, will cost about $500 for each employee. Akira explains that 4 vendor employees will need this access, making the total cost $2,000 per year. The CFO replies he will now think about it. The project manager and team cannot really do anything more now. It's up to the CFO, right? This is yet another type of a project event, a decision. Without the confirmed decision, the project team cannot really progress. This is also a common case in projects, where a delayed decision by a higher management impacts the schedule. So what to do? Let's further expand our drop-down so we also capture this type of event and log it. A second D is added to the title. And there we have it. This is the so-called RAID log, standing for risks, actions, issues, dependencies, and decisions. A single document capturing this precious project information. Can you now imagine what a difference it makes when a project manager uses a nicely structured document for managing project work? Let me tell you from practice, it makes a big difference. A project manager using this tool can stay on top of all important events, monitoring and controlling effectively the work, team members, and stakeholders. On the other hand, the chances to miss something important without such a tool are huge. So, project manager. I am sure in your next project this will be one of the first documents you create. In the next lesson, we will make a few more considerations on how you can structure your RAID log. See you there.
Section 15 and Lecture Number 70, RAID Log, Structures.
So, by using the evergreen Microsoft Excel, we created the RAID log, the essential tool for managing project events. Now, let's see what other shapes this document can take. In real life, we often see many variations of this document. Simple actions log, actions and issues log, risk, actions, issues and dependencies log, a standalone risk log, etc. There isn't any confirmed best option for this document in the project management community, besides that the document must exist in each project in some shape. So we will provide you with our practical recommendations coming from our own project management experience. Option with one single table. As described in the previous lessons, it is quite convenient to have everything in one file, even in one table. On the other hand, the different nature of the events, risks, actions, etc. may require different columns. For example, we already know that whenever managing risks, we need to add severity and probability of occurrence. We can add those two columns in our RAID table, but you need to agree this table will become too heavy. And there will be no contents in these two columns for the other types of events. This will make the table harder to read and reduce its practicality. In real life, too complex structures lead to less frequent use of the document. One alternative is to put the different event types in separate tables in different Excel sheets in the same file. One sheet for actions, one for issues, one for risks, dependencies, and decisions. In this way, you can customize each table to the specific case and be really efficient as you will customize your management per each type of event. The drawback of this option is the project manager's attention. When the going gets tough, you will need to remember to go through each sheet on a regular basis. In real life, the project manager may start forgetting to check all of the sheets regularly and get used to working with only 2 or 3 max. Yes, it doesn't sound nice, but after all, project managers are humans too. Between A and B, we believe B will be the better option. It will be cleaner. But is it possible to have option C with something in between? Absolutely. So here is our extra advice on structuring your RAID log. 1 by 1. Actions. This is a must. You need to have this in the reviewed format as a minimum. Same goes for the issues. These, however, we would keep in the same table, together with the actions. They can easily be logged in the same frame as they are similar enough. Then, decisions. When you think about it, a decision is a form of action. Hence, with some exceptions, I wouldn't recommend creating a separate sheet for decisions. More often than not, decisions can be logged as an action. They will be managed as effectively in the same table, as long as they are described well, capturing who needs to take the decision and by when. Dependencies. From a practical standpoint, the dependencies you need to document would mainly be external, coming from other projects, other businesses, or regulatory matters. Most of the internal dependencies should already be considered and captured in your other project management documents, e.g. critical path analysis or Gantt chart. Furthermore, these events usually have a longer life and may need to be tracked for months, while the general actions and issues get logged, worked on, and closed within a couple of days or weeks. Hence, you can track these dependencies on a separate sheet within the same file. Finally, risks. We strongly recommend to keep the risks in a separate Excel sheet or even a separate file. This is also in line with the established project management best practice. Risk management is a big topic and quite specific, as we know, so it deserves special attention. Analyzing and documenting severity, probability of occurrence, and the possible mitigations and contingencies is key. Furthermore, risks also have a longer life than the daily and weekly actions and issues. A risk may remain open from the beginning of the project until its last day. These were our practical recommendations for structuring an effective RAID log. But before we close this topic, let's refresh our knowledge of what a risk log should include by going through the steps in Excel and further strengthening our practical skills. See you in the next lesson.
Section 15 and lecture number 71, Risks Log.
Hi again. You can already see that using Excel for project management work is useful and easy. Not a risky business at all. As promised, let's quickly go through the Excel steps for creating a risk log. But first, let's take a quick look at our template. You see it is similar to the other documents we already saw. Good. We start with the number column. Then we have the risk described in a few words, and next to it, there is a second column where it is described in greater detail. This is another useful tip for more efficient management. You keep a short and simple title column and use a second field for all details, which you may need to read once or twice, but after that, you will not refer to every time you open the document. This tip can be applied also to the general RAID log. Then we have the severity and the probability of occurrence. There are many ways how to grade these two characteristics. It can be a percentage, 0 to 100, especially in the case of probability. If you go that way, however, make sure you have solid data and a professional statistician or data scientist to advise you on these numbers. If you are analyzing the risk of an earthquake destroying $1 billion construction project, you don't want to get these numbers wrong. Different options are also available for severity. For example, This can be measured in dollar amounts to estimate the damage on the company's revenue or profit that the risk can generate. Certain projects require a comprehensive analysis, but in the general case you can track the two with a simpler scale, the range of low, medium, and high, as in our example. We are sure you already know how to configure your drop-down menu and add conditional formatting to it, so we will not repeat all these steps. Finally, in the last column, we have the contingency and mitigation actions. This can be a free text column where you describe your plan of how to prepare for the risk and limit the danger, and then how to contain it once it manifests. If things are unmanageable, have your plan B ready. Perfect. Our risk log is ready. So there we have it. Our RAID log document or documentation is created. We are now fully equipped to build the RAID log for our next project and adapt it according to our own way of working. Oh, you want to find out what happened with some of the logged events? Let's quickly see in the next video before we close the RAID chapter.
Section 15 and lecture number 72, Project Management Logs, Outro.
Let's see what happens with the dependency case first. The event was about the Singapore branch, where the local team could not provide the exact employee names due to the other project running in parallel. The two project managers organize a meeting to discuss the point. The other project manager explains there is this Lean Six Sigma project ongoing. Processes are being analyzed, and after completed, names can be provided. Our project manager asks the other if they have any idea when this will be ready. The other answers, "Of course, I am using a work tracker to follow the progress." There it is. We have completed about 80% and plan to be fully ready by the end of next week. This means we can provide the names on the following week. Is that okay? Yes, our project manager answers. This will not be an issue for my project, as long as we get the list of names by the given date. That is good news. Our project manager updates the event in the RAID log. Then we have the case with the decision stuck on the table of the Japan CFO. They review the details. 3 licenses of $500 per year makes $1,500. The alternative with dedicating internal workforce seems to be less beneficial, so the CFO confirms the preferred solution. Decision is finally made, and the project manager closes this item in the log. This was resolved, but in France, the budget request was rejected. Why so? The project manager decides to focus on the already logged issue. The project manager organizes a meeting with Frank to understand better. Our project manager asks what the total cost is. Frank: about $10,000. Project manager is surprised. That is much more than what was paid in Japan. What is the price per license? Frank answers, it's $500. This is the same as in Japan, so why is the total cost so different? Frank says, well, our contractor has 20 employees. The cost will be 20 times $500, which equals $10,000. And so the project manager asks, but do all 20 employees need this license for the system? Frank is puzzled. I don't know, actually. I will need to talk to them in our next meeting, which is in 6 days. No need to mention that an action will now be logged in the RAID log, right? The two agree to meet again in a week. In the next meeting, Frank has good news. It turned out only 5 employees will need this access. The total cost in this case is $2,500 and not $10,000. They inform the CFO. After 2 days, the CFO confirms the budget is approved. Action is marked as completed in the RAID log and in the tracker. Great job, project manager. Your new skills of creating RAID logs and trackers and putting them into practice are building up your project management profile. Keep up the good work.
Section 15 and lecture number 73, Project Schedule.
Welcome back. The next documents we will create in Excel are the project schedule and Gantt chart. In our example, we will use a high-level schedule for a theoretical project about a software development and its implementation. We start with the number column. However, we will not add the numbering itself right away this time, but will wait to structure the next column. We will be using sub-activities and hence decimal numbering. Next column, activities. Here, all the activities that need to be performed in the project need to be listed. This is the most critical column. You already know how important it is for the project manager to identify all important activities that need to take place in the project. One thing you need to make 100% sure you have in this list are all activities from the critical path. They will be the backbone of your activity list and project plan. For our example, we will use a shorter list, but in real life, the plan for a similar project would include many rows. Okay, let's continue. The main activities we will write here are requirements definition, project kickoff, system development, integration testing, user acceptance testing, rollout to business units, support period, and project closure. We can consider those as the critical path. Then, sub-activities and tasks have to be listed under some of these main items for greater detail. Note, we are keeping the sub-activities to the right, so it's visually easy to understand they fall under the overall parent activity. We do this by selecting the sub-activities and clicking on the Increase Indent button in the Home menu. Now, we can also update the numbering respectively and use decimal numbering for the sub-activities. Finally, I will put the main activities in bold so I can highlight their importance. Moving on, we need to add the next fundamental columns for a schedule, start and end dates. Our first step has to be formatting the date. We type the first date, let's say March 2nd, 2026. While positioned on the cell, click on Number Formatting. The Format Cell menu opens. Excel has already recognized we are logging a date in this cell. The only thing left for us is to pick the preferred format of this date. My preference is to use a format which includes numbers for the day and year and letters for the month. If your project is planned to finish within the same year, you can also skip the year numbers and use less space. Click OK, and there you have it. To apply the same format to all date cells, you can use the Format Painter option. Select the cell you have already formatted, then, again from the Home menu, click on Format Painter. And finally, paste the preferred format to all cells including dates. Another tip for better appearance is to slightly reduce the font of the date cells and center them as usual. Okay, we're set. Now you need to populate the target, start and end dates for your project. Great. Next one, status column. We know how to set it up, creating the drop-down menu and using the conditional formatting functionality to assign colors. It is also a good moment to pause here and discuss in more detail the status options and the status topic in project management in general. So far, we used the statuses not started, ongoing, and completed. However, these options cannot tell us if the progress is normal, if there is a risk of delay, or if it is already delayed. To track this aspect, project managers use the so-called RAG status, which stands for red, amber, green. Logically, red means the activity is delayed, amber flags there is risk not to achieve the due date, and green means work is progressing normally, like a traffic light. We already have the ongoing option marked as green, so we need to add the two new options, delayed and at risk. We add them to our drop-down menu using the data validation Excel functionality and then color code them via the conditional formatting functionality. For example, if the target end date is approaching and we are not close to completion, the status may be updated as amber. If the target end date is already behind us, well, this is a delay and should be marked red. Perfect. We now have the basic project schedule created in Microsoft Excel. In the next lesson, we will use our Excel sheet to create the one and only Gantt chart. See you there.
Section 15 and lecture number 74, Gantt chart, months.
Hello. With the list of activities in place and their target start and end dates, we are ready to lay our plan on a calendar-like table and make it more visual. In other words, create a Gantt chart. So we start with the activities and the dates, and we already have this information. Next, we need to prepare our calendar table to the right. In a Gantt chart, the columns are organized as a timeline, with calendar days, weeks, or months. Let's use months for the frequency and see what our Gantt chart will look like. We start with the main activities from the critical path and target dates. We write Jan in the first column to the right here. Click, hold, and scroll to the right. The following months appear automatically. Excel recognizes you want to list the months. You drag as much as needed. In our case, by February, the year after. Next, above the months, it will be good to indicate the year. We can add a new row and then merge the cells which are above the first year months. We then name it and do the same for the following one. Choosing colors and formatting, and we are ready with the rows and columns. In the main space, we will be marking which activity happens when. Before we start, I suggest you update the color of all these cells to no fill, so that the default cell borders are visible. This makes it easier to read. You can do this by selecting the space and then changing the color to no fill. Great. Now we need to fill the main space according to the start and end dates. Requirements definition will take place in March and April, so we mark it on the calendar by coloring these cells. You can pick the color you like. I will use orange. Then, kickoff will take place in April, while system development will be worked on from April until the end of July. We mark these accordingly, under the respective months and to the right of the respective activity. Great. We do this for the whole list. Good. This is an appropriate level of detail for presenting the project to higher management, for example. We are now good on the high level, but we know very well that this is never sufficient for a project manager. To do that, we need to be able to mark weeks or even days. For example, you can see that the first activity should end on the 10th of April. However, our only option now is to mark the entire month of April against it. See? Hence, let's use weeks for the frequency as another option. We will see this in the next lesson. See you there.
Section 15 and lecture number 75, Gantt chart, weeks.
We will now create the Gantt chart using weeks as the calendar frequency. First of all, here we will have the full list of activities, sub-activities, and tasks that the project manager has identified for the project. Then we can start again from the first cell next to the activity list. This cell will now indicate a specific calendar week. I like marking the date of the first working day for the given week. For example, we can use the first Monday in the month of March 2026, the 2nd of March. Let's continue filling in the rest of the weeks in March. I will manually add the next one, 9th of March. From now on, I can automatically fill in the start date of the following weeks. I do this by 1. Selecting the 2 cells with dates, and 2. Drag to the right. I will drag 3 more cells to complete the month of March. There we go. The start dates of the weeks in March are now filled in. Each column represents a specific calendar week. In the same way, I will add the weeks for the whole period of my project. Great. Week titles are ready. Now we can mark the activities in the space against each week as we did in the previous lesson. We can now also track the plan in greater detail in the Gantt chart. The exact week when an activity is supposed to start and end is now visible. As we did in the previous lesson, we will add the months and years in 2 new rows above, merging the cells above the March weeks, naming it March. We will continue in the same way for the remaining months. Then we repeat the same for the years. Great, the calendar is now easy to see. Okay, now we need to improve the appearance of the first 4 column titles. The titles are only displayed against the week titles. We can simply merge each cell with the above rows, so they align with the whole calendar, week, month, and year rows. One by one, we merge and align. Nice. Finally, we will see a few formatting tips for optimizing the main space of the chart. Here are a few options to optimize the width, which comes from longer time periods. Select all columns, including week dates, and double-click on a random border at the top. This will optimize the width of the columns and save you some space. If this is still too wide for you, you can change the format of the date in the weeks row to 2 numbers only. We do this from the number format menu. After we do it, we need to optimize the width of the entire table again. Okay. Another option is to change the orientation of the date text. Select all date cells, click on the orientation menu and select Rotate Text Up. Again, we repeat tip 1. Space is now optimized. At the end, it is good to select the whole table and apply outside borders from the Borders menu. So there you have your Gantt chart. It is extremely useful for so many reasons. It illustrates the activities against the calendar period. You can see which activities move in parallel with which ones sequentially. You can see in a matter of seconds where you are today and what is upcoming for your project team. Hence, it is useful not only during the planning phase, but also for monitoring and control purposes. Alright, in the next lesson, we will see the last Excel tutorials and create some budget documents. Money is waiting for us.
Section 15 and lecture number 76, Budget, Simple Table.
The final group of Microsoft Excel documents we will create together are related to budgets and cost management. In this domain, the ultimate goal of the project manager and their organization is to have 2 things: a realistic budget with all related estimates and a process to track the actual spending against this budget. We are already familiar with the budgeting point from the cost planning lessons. Remember? Let's quickly repeat these steps. 1. Identify the cost-generating activities of your project by going through the activity list. 2. Estimate the financial expenses for the identified activities. 3. Add buffers to the estimates wherever needed. And finally, 4. Determine the expected time period in which the expenses will be incurred. This sounds simple from a theoretical standpoint, but in real-life projects there can be many variations and hidden steps. Costs can be different depending on the case, on the contracts and agreements. Bigger costs should be negotiated and agreed with the vendors and documented in a contract or an agreement. Smaller costs, on the other hand, may only be planned for and estimated during the planning phase, but without signing any contracts. The related expenses can be approved and made during the execution itself. Once all costs are estimated and the overall project budget is calculated and approved, the project will move on to execution. Better have your bank accounts prepared. Money starts flying out of your pocket at this very moment. Let's start creating our Excel table. We begin, as usual, with a number column. Then the expense name, where the project manager will describe what the money will be spent on, the so-called cost-generating activity. Next, we have the budget amount. Let's now add this $96,000 to the table. We name the expense and then add the amount in the budget column. We need to properly format the financial numbers. To do that, select the cell and use the accounting number format to select a currency, in our case, dollars. If the numbers are big, you can also hide the decimals using the decrease decimals function. Finally, we add a column for actual, where the project manager will be adding all actual costs incurred. Whenever payments are done from the project budget, they have to be registered in this column. We apply the same formatting as we have financial numbers here. I can use the Format Painter functionality. Alright, in the same way, we can also add other cost elements in this table. For instance, another cost-generating activity can be the services of an engineer who has to integrate the new production line with other existing machines on the floor. This time, however, the vendor cannot specify in advance what amount will have to be paid. They can only agree with your company about the hourly rate of the engineer and the prices of the various materials he may need to use. So how do we track this one? We'll see in the next video.
Section 15 and lecture number 77, Budget, Time and Materials.
We can proceed with the final budget column. The contents here will be the result of the multiplication of unity price by the unit number or volume. The calculation is straightforward. You simply need to put an equal sign to start the formula. Then select the unit's price cell from the respective row and multiply by using the star symbol by the following cell, standing for the estimated number. We press Enter and the calculation is ready. We now simply drag down so the same formula is applied for all remaining rows. Great. Moving on, we need to calculate the total of all these costs to see the full budget for the engineer services. No science is needed here. We select the cell below the table and below the budget column and use the simplest sum formula. Typing again, the equal sign, then sum, and finally we select all cells above. Click Enter. There you have it, the total budget for the engineering services. As you know, budgeting is done during planning, but when the project moves to execution, the expenses start occurring. In order to transform your budget table for monitoring and control purposes, you will need a dedicated column. And yes, it is for the actual costs. Here you will be adding all expenses that are made for your project. Formatting is the same, but if you like, you can just add a different color to put the focus here. The final tip we can give is to add one more column, where you can highlight whether the actual amount is lower or higher than the budgeted one. In this balance cell, you need to add a formula to calculate the budgeted amounts minus the actual amount. Logically, if the difference is negative, that would mean you have spent more than the budget. To make the table complete, we will use the conditional formatting option to highlight the negative amounts, which need immediate attention from the project manager. Select the range of cells, then on the Home tab, click on Conditional Formatting and select New Rule. Choose Format Cells that contain. In the Below menu, select Less Than, and in the last field, type 0. Next, click on the Format button and select a color. In this case, red is the appropriate one. Click OK and you are set. The negative amounts cannot be missed now, and the reasons for being over budget will have to be analyzed. We will do a little bit of formatting of the table and the final row for totals for better appearance. Perfect. We can now easily track the expenses and know if we are progressing according to budget for each cost element and overall. Budgeting lessons are now completed. So we wish you a nice spending, Project Manager.
Section 15 and lecture number 78, Formatting Tips and Tricks.
In this last lesson, we will share some advice for better formatting in Excel. Note, we will not be looking at any heavy formatting, as this is rarely expected from the project manager. Of course, there are cases when documents and presentations need to be created with the most professional formatting possible. However, we will not focus on it here as this is not part of the fundamental skills a project manager should have. Most of the project manager templates are operational in nature, internal to the project team and key stakeholders, so this is the first important step for your development as project manager. To be able to create clean documents that are easy to read. Having said that, let's see our tips. 1. Starting with a blank Excel page. Before we even type the first letter into our table, it is good practice to remove the default grid lines in the sheet. We are already familiar with this, so let's continue. 2. Formatting the title rows. You need to highlight visually the title row so it's easy to see. The key levers here are the color of the cell and the text color. Whenever choosing colors, try to be in line with your company colors or at least not in conflict with them, using red versus blue, etc. Then you basically have two options. Either go with a lighter cell color, this one for example, and dark letters to create a contrast, let's say black or dark blue. Second option is to do the other thing around. Go for a darker cell color and then apply white letters. I also like using letters in bold for the title row so it is well highlighted. Final tip here, try to avoid using the rag colors, red, amber and green. These colors are a bit too strong for title rows, and in addition they will be very similar to your status column colors and it will not look very pretty as a whole. 3. Formatting the table borders. It is good to have some kind of borders. The easiest thing to do is select the table and then select the All Borders option. Alternatively, you can select the space and change the color from white to no fill. The default Excel grid lines appear. Another option is to use only the horizontal borders. To do that, we select the first row and add a bottom border from the Borders menu. Then we select this entire row and click on the Format Painter. This function copies only the cells formatting, the way they look. Finally, we select the remaining part of the table for which we want to adopt the given formatting. Excel applies the same formatting to the rest. Great, thanks Excel. 4. Text alignment. We need to think how to position the text in each cell. This usually is either to the left or in the middle. We easily do that by clicking on a column and choosing from the Home tab the alignment. But how do we choose the alignment for the various contents? Our tip is the following. For columns where the data is short and standardized in terms of characters, such as status, date, completion percentage, we would want to go for center alignment. The contents have the same structure and are usually short. For columns that include more characters, on the other hand, we suggest using the alignment to the left. These would be task names, descriptions, comments, etc. No matter what you choose, however, make sure it is the same alignment for each column. Columns with mixed alignments make the table look really disorganized. That's better. 5. Another tip for tables. Extra space below the titles row and the totals row. In case you want to add some air into a table with totals, something you may have in a budget or in a tracker with completion percentages, you can add 2 new rows. One under the titles row and one above the row where you have your total. You need those to be clean. The easiest thing is to select the blank cell to the left and drag to the right. Lastly, select the 2 rows together by holding the Control button while selecting. And then reduce the height of one of them. Excel will perform the same adjustment in the height of the other row too. That creates some free space, which some people may find visually appealing. Finally, if you do not like creating a table manually, you can always use the default Microsoft Excel table designs. To do that, select the contents of your table, go to the Insert tab and click on Table. A pop-up appears asking you for the range. Since you already selected it, you can click OK. Now, from the Table Design tab, you have many options on what your table could look like. So, feel free to use the default table functionality. Great! These were our tips for formatting your project management templates in Excel. Thanks so much for watching.
Section 15 and lecture number 79, MS Excel for Project Management, Conclusions.
Congratulations on completing this section of the course. The templates we created together in Microsoft Excel are essential to all projects. They are the bridge between project management theory and the real-life activities the project manager performs. In terms of software, Microsoft Excel also has certain limitations and may not always be sufficient. For example, the project schedule and Gantt chart may be created and maintained on a more high level in Excel. However, if you need to prepare a schedule with hundreds of rows, Microsoft Excel will not be the best option. More specialized project management tools will come in handy in this case, Microsoft Project or Smartsheet, just to name a few options. Nevertheless, Microsoft Excel remains one of the most universal tools, and as we saw in all these lessons, it's extremely useful for the project management profession. You can customize the documents for your specific project needs. You can pick the various types of information to show: task, responsible, due date, start date, status, few statuses if you have a few important steps, completion percentage, and so on. We are sure that you will now be able to find the right mix for your next project, and what you have learned is not simply how to use a couple of Excel formulas, but rather how to create new project management documents and how to use them when delivering your next project. And what is even more important than the technical aspects is that you have learned the logical processes behind the creation of key project management tools. Nowadays, there are countless online tools for managing work, tasks, teams, and projects. With the knowledge you have from this section of the course, we are confident that even if you need to use another tool, you will quickly understand the mechanics behind it and adopt it easily. After all, the end goal is that you learn how to manage projects on your own. Your project management skills in Excel are now excellent.
Section 15 and lecture number 80, Project Management Notes and PMBOK.